A lot of times I carry on conversations with people about their relationships and church and people and everything else. And I get this same statement. You don't understand. All I need is God, just God. Me and God, we got it all figured out, and just Him, and I'm okay. And I keep saying, really? That's all you need is just God? And I'll tell them, I'm telling you right now, that is not just all I need. If all I had was just God, can I tell you something? I would be a very lonely person. And I don't say that. God does. See, God created Adam, and God was totally satisfied with the relationship that He had with Adam, which was better than all creation. And Adam, he governed over the animals, took care of them, watched over them, took care of the land and all of that stuff, and the garden that God had put him in. And he had all of this stuff. And in the daytime, God would come down and He would walk with him and talk with him. And I hear people say, that's all I need. Well, God looked at Adam with all he needed, that people think, and He looked at him and He says, with all of the things that I made, they were good. With man, very good. But when He saw Adam, just Adam, He said, this is not good for man to be alone. So I'm going to make him a helpmeet, someone to come alongside of him, to develop relationships with, because that's what he needs. And so what we need to understand is that when Jesus died on the cross, it was helping us to restore relationships, number one, with God, and number two, with each other. Not through us, but all relationships, ladies and gentlemen, goes through Jesus on the cross. Hands stretched out, head pointed towards the sky, everything flows to Him and goes out. No other thing. You can look at anything and everything else, but let me tell you something. Nothing else in the whole world will satisfy the craving that you really desire in your soul than Jesus. And He then gives us that relationship between us and God now gets mended. And guess what? Through that relationship now through Jesus going to God, God says, son, what do you want to do? I've given you all power in heaven and earth, and now use it. Use it to take care of my children, your bride. And so the amazing part about it is love reigns. No matter what you do, Jesus will always love you. There's nothing you can do that will make Him turn His back on you. Nothing. Nothing at all. Then, last week, we talked about our past and love in the past. Because here's what we do, and we all do this. Every one of us do this. I don't care who you are. I don't care what's going on. Somewhere, someplace, you will let your past define who you are. And God said that in Him, we are a new creature. So guess what He's doing? We're starting over. The things we used to do, Paul says those are the things that I know that I shouldn't do, but I still do them anyway. He says, but I know what I should do, and that's a difficult task for me to do. Because why? We keep wanting to go back to the past, back to the past, back to the past. And Jesus is trying to tell us, hold on a minute. I'm trying to change you right now in the present. Why? Because I'm getting you prepared for the future. Remember when you went to school, and some of you still are, And when you walked into that school, the very first thing that they wanted you to do was start learning how to speak your name. They would ask you the question, who are you? They would also try to get you to learn your address, your phone number. Just in case of an emergency, you could tell somebody. And they would try to do that over and over and over again. Why? Not to correct your past, but in the future, you're going to need that. You're going to need to know who you are, where you live, and how to get a hold of somebody, because you might be in danger. And then from there, they begin to learn you letters and sounds and all of the things. And then you begin to put all of that stuff together and you begin to read. Because why? You're going to need the reading to be able to comprehend your math and your literature and your history and everything else. And so what's it doing? All of that stuff is rebuilding who you are to make you prepare for the future. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Is love reigning in our present, right now, or reigning over our present time? So, when Jesus endured the cross, there were some things that we needed to learn. And one of the things is this, that because of the love of Jesus on the cross, God forgives the sins of our past. He doesn't really want us to bring them along. But we tend to want to hang on to this baggage. It's almost like we got a suitcase packed for our trip of life. And God is trying to say, here, what did Jesus tell his disciples? Follow me. And by the way, I need you to go home and pack a suitcase because we're going to be gone a few years. No, he didn't. He said, don't even go home. Don't even go home and get money. I'll take care of it for you. I'll make sure you have a place to live. I'll make sure that you are fed. He said, I don't know where we're going to sleep every night, but we'll find some place. And if not, hey, we control this anyway. You know, when we can perform miracles. If you need a house built, it won't take you 6 months. We can speak it into existence if God wants. And that's what he does in our lives. And that's what he's trying to tell us. So we're going to play a game. See how well you are listening. Remember when you were growing up, you played this game called Simon Says? Remember that? And so what would happen is, when they would say, Simon Says, then you would respond with something, right? Correct? Okay. So everybody knows how the rules go. Everybody? Everybody? Okay. So let's start by Simon Says, clap your hands. Simon Says, stop. Some of you guys are not playing the game. All right. Simon Says, blink your eyes. You can do like this. All right. Simon Says, stop. Simon Says, stomp your feet. Simon Says, stop. Simon Says, stand up. Simon Says, you all must participate, please. All right. Sit down. Simon Says, sit down. You all did very well. Most people, when you tell them to sit down, they'll just sit. Because why? They forgot the rules about all of these things. But do you know what the game of Simon Says was really to teach us? It was there to teach us self-will needs to be conquered. Because when we stand up, what's the next thing we want to do? Sit down. In the very beginning, when I told you clap your hands, some of you all determined that I will clap my hands only as long as I want to. I will stop clapping my hands when I feel like stop clapping my hands. I will not wait until you tell me to stop. Isn't that like a little child? And so what ends up happening is in our life, as we're growing and as we're aging, what ends up happening, there are things we want to do, even as Christians. And Paul made it very plain. He said, there are things that I want to do, but I know that I shouldn't, but I'll do it anyway. Even though that I know that the consequences may be dramatic, but I'm still going to do it because I want to. As we've learned the song of Frank Sinatra, I did it my way. And that's what we want to do in our life. So one of the things that we need to understand is this, and we're going to talk about it, is number one, your choices and my choices really reveal to us who's in charge of our life. So many times I hear people tell me constantly, I just love God. I love Jesus. And man, he is my rock. He's my controller. And I've given him everything in my life. And I'll say to him, I haven't seen you in a while. Where you been? Oh, you don't understand, Pastor. I've been really busy. And I understand there are things in our life that makes us busy. Okay? But there are other things that we need to understand. It's like this. When's the last time that you went to your job, if you still got one, and walked into the employer and told the employer, oh, by the way, I'm taking off this afternoon. Well, we got all this stuff we need you to do. Yeah, it'll be there tomorrow. He says, yeah, it'll be there, but you won't. You gone. How many times did you ever tell your kids you were going to do something with them and something came up? And it wasn't really necessary for you to do that. But it's because that was something that you liked better than taking the kids to a place they wanted to go. Oh, I never did that. Really? How many times did you go to bed on them? I don't want to stay up and watch this movie with them. Y'all are on your own. I just want to do my thing. And a lot of times what happens is this. And so Paul, in his writing, got a lot to say about the influence of God in our life, rather than the influence of the world. And so we're going to start this morning with a very familiar scripture. It's in Romans chapter 12 and verse number 1. Okay? Because there should be something reigning in our life. And if you will let this reign in your life, it will solve a lot of the issues that you're having. Paul says in verse number 1, therefore, okay? Remember, we talked about this last week. There's this little word that Paul uses about 260 times in his writings in the New Testament. He uses this word therefore. He's got a message. He's got a message that he's saying. And then all of a sudden he uses the word therefore in Romans chapter 12, verse number 1, which starts to bring another idea alongside of whatever he was talking about there. And he says, therefore, brothers and sisters, in view of the mercies of God, he says, I urge you to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God, or acceptable. This is your true worship. Worship is not you standing up and singing a song. That's part of worship. But I hear people all the time say, I'm going to go worship God. I'm not going to worship. I should be worshiping him constantly. I don't go to worship, I bring worship with me. If I'm going to worship, I'm missing something in my life. Because let me tell you something. A worship leader cannot teach you to worship. A worship leader helps bring your worship out. That is why with the songs, I hear people say, you don't understand, Pastor, I can't sing. So what? God didn't ask you to sing. That is not what he said. He says, make a joyful noise. And many of you might say, would you sit next to me and there'll be lots of noise coming out. And it may not be joyful to your ears. It will. If you are singing from your soul and bringing out the message, how great is our God. The expressions and the emotions and the feelings that are just bubbling up, that are just overflowing. That's worship. You can't teach people that. You can teach them the song. You can teach them the melody, but you cannot teach them to worship. And this is what he's saying. He says, I urge you to present your bodies a living sacrifice. What's he saying? Sacrifice to the worship leader? No. Worship is coming to God. Your living sacrifice is to God, to him, okay? He says, do not be conformed to this age, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may discern what is the good, pleasing, and perfect will of God. I have shared this with people, and we'll talk about this, and that is this. How many of you all have ever taken a picture with a camera or your phone? Huh? Some of you all need to learn. Okay, when you go to take a picture with your phone, used to, you only had one lens. Now they got three, you know, and that's supposed to make the picture taking better. It doesn't. Okay, it's just a more expensive thing to put on the gadget. Okay, is really all it is. And so what do you do when you take the picture? Okay, you go to your camera, right? And so I'm looking through the lens. And if I want to improve the looks of certain people, or I want to get a close-up, you know, I can do those things. But if that lens gets dirty, or I put my finger over it, what ends up happening? It's going to be a messed up picture. How many times have you got that snapshot, and as you got that snapshot, you look and, wow, I can see my hand. That's really cool, you know, but that really ruined my picture. So here's what he's saying. Here's what Paul's saying. Paul's saying this. He's saying, what God is doing is looking through his lens into your life. And he is transforming you into what he wants you to be. And he does that by the renewing of your mind. I hear people all the time say, Pastor, you don't understand. I can't forget my past. God didn't ask you to forget your past. That's his job. But what he's saying to us is, don't let it control you. Because Satan is going to play mind games. Okay? My wife and I, we travel a lot. Okay? And so there's certain places where you travel, like when we went to Alaska, there are a lot of times you get up in the high altitudes and you look down and everything looks really cool, but you really can't see much. And so they've got these, these things where you can look through there and begin to see, as you focus, the smaller intricacies of what you're looking at. And you begin to start the beauty unfolding of maybe a plant that to you just looked like some colors. But all of a sudden you begin to focus more in on that, and you begin to see the intricacies of just the leaves and everything of that plant. And how they're just like fingers and veins and arteries just running through that plant. And you begin to see the beauty of the color. And you notice that it's not just one shade of red, that it's multiple shades of red all blended in together. And you see how beautiful that is. And sometimes what happens is we don't see the beauty of our life because what we're seeing is through the lens of our eyes. We're not seeing through the lens of God's eyes, where God is really focused on a pinpoint of where he's trying to show us, this is the point that right now I'm working on and I'm trying to change. But what happens is we continue to live in the past and allow that pinpointed thing in our life to blur the whole picture of everything that God's trying to cleanse us from and to show us what it is. And so what ends up happening is how many people that you walk up to and you talk to them, ask them, how are you today? When I was growing up, here's the expression that you always heard. I've got more ailments than Carter's got liver pills. And I always thought, okay, that was funny. But what does Carter and liver pills have to do with how many problems you got? I don't know how many pills he's got, but evidently you got a whole bunch of problems. Or they would come in and you would say, how are you doing today? Oh, brother, man, my arm hurts. My back hurts. I couldn't sleep last night. The wife kept me up. How comes? She kept poking me and telling me to stop snoring. I didn't know I was snoring. She should have just left me asleep. Or got up and gone to the car. And the next thing you know, the locks on the doors have been changed. And you don't have a bed no more. I hope you love that car, because that's where you're going to be. But we do. We grumble and complain about our circumstances. For instance, how many times do you complain right now when you go to fill up your car or your truck and you look at how much you have to pay? I was getting gas yesterday morning early, and this guy had a truck. And I mean a truck. One of those with the biggest gas tank you could ever get in it. Okay? So what did he do? He used his card as a debit card. And here's what he does. He goes up to the guy and he says, listen, he says, the thing just stopped at $125 and my tank's not full. And the guy says, what do you want me to do about it? He says, here's what I want you to do about it, is I'm getting 70 cents off on the gallon. And I still got another 15 gallons to go. And I stopped at $125. And I'm not going to pay full price for that gallon of gas. I want my 70 cents off. And the guy says, I don't know what to do. And he says, set the price back to what it was. Either that or come over here and fix this thing. He says, I can't help it. You used your card as a debit card, and it would only go up to $125, and you're at the limit. He says, what do you want me to do? And he says, I would get another bank. And it's like, no, you can't do that. Not right there on the spot. But this guy, he was getting irate because he wanted the other 15 gallons in his tank at 70 cents off, and I didn't blame him, you know? But we grumble and complain about circumstances all the time. We grumble because it's raining. We grumble because it's cold. We grumble because it gets too hot. We grumble because this. We grumble because of that. And we can't change the weather. I don't care what they say about global warming. God wants it to rain. I don't care how hot it is, and I don't care if there's no cloud in the sky. God will make it rain. And if he wants it to snow, it can be 150 degrees outside, and God can still make it snow. And you can complain all you want to, but I don't think anybody would complain to snow when it's 150 degrees outside. I think they would welcome it. But we do. We complain so much about circumstances that we can't do anything about. And what we need to understand is God's in control. Paul says, I've learned to be content in all things. All things. It doesn't mean I gotta like it. I don't like it when a loved one dies. I don't like it when things don't always go my way. But sometimes I need to learn that there are some times I don't get my way in order for God to protect me and to keep me out of trouble, because I want to do it my way and do my thing and whatever I want to do. So what happens is we want to be in control and please us instead of letting God be in control and pleasing him. And so we need to understand that my choices really do reveal, really do, who reigns in my life. You remember the story or the illustration that I used, and maybe I just need to do this every Sunday. The empty chair and who's sitting in it. You can decide who sits on that throne. And we do. And most of the time, what we do is we like to sit in the throne and control our life as we're watching, instead of letting God sit on the throne and allowing us to observe what he's wanting, his plans for us were. I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. I know what I've got plans to do, but they may change. And they may change quickly. And I may not like it. But evidently, God's got something that he wants. And so I need to move out of the way. And what we need to do is when we begin to start looking at what God's got in place in his mercy and stuff, we really are compelled to live our lives as living sacrifices, holy and acceptable to him. Psalms chapter 51, in verse number 16 and 17, he says, you do not want a sacrifice, or I would give it. You are not pleased with a burnt offering. The sacrifice pleasing to God is this: a broken spirit. You will not despise a broken and humbled heart, God. Do you understand the meaning of train up a child in the way that they should go, and when they are old, they will not depart? It doesn't mean beat them into submission. It means set a pattern for them. Because what happens when you set a pattern for them? You break the spirit of that child and mold that spirit into the way that God wants that child to be. Because God had plans for your children even before you were born. Sometimes our plans for our children are not necessarily God's plans for our children. That's why we give our children to Him, because they're a blessing for us as we begin through life. Romans chapter 12, verse number 2, we already read about that, because when you think about it, the world, ladies and gentlemen, is filled with greed and selfishness. Selfishness. It is. They're everywhere. I watch people all the time. Remember how it used to be when an elderly person was coming up and you were there, and maybe you were getting ready to go into the store or to the restaurant or whatever, and an elderly person was coming up, you would always reach around and open the door for them and let them go in first, and then you would go in after. I'm watching kids today. They do this. They're walking up and you're holding the door for an elderly person, and they just run them over. I've got to get in there and get that. I got to get my name on the list to get a seat before they do. You know, those 10 seconds makes a big difference on how long I've got to wait to get my food. And it's like, really? What is this? I mean, we're selfish. And every once in a while, it's like, what was it? Friday night, when we had over 100 and some cars in this parking lot, and all of these women went out at the same time. And it's like, what are we going to do? Rick says, I got it. He says, here's what we're going to do. He says, I've already got the police coming. I don't control it. But I want to, I don't know about you all, but 3 police personnel and 290 some women, it's kind of outnumbered. And have you ever seen women mad? You'll know it. They don't even have to say anything. It's the look. And after 50 years of marriage, I understand the look. So we lined them all up. And the police were out there, and they held traffic in both directions. And within 5 minutes, every car was out of this parking lot. And so I'm going to get them back out there next Sunday, and I'm going to have them block off Roosevelt and direct all the cars to the parking lot. And so I'm trying to think of a way to get the parking lot full. Then I thought they can empty it, they can fill it, They've got the control to do these things. Okay, number 2, you need to change some patterns that are going to change your life. How many of you are stuck right now doing the same thing every day? We're stuck doing the same thing day after day after day. And what ends up happening? I wish my life was different. Okay, so what are you going to do? I'm going to get up at 8. At 8:10, I got to drink my coffee. At 8:15, I got to do this. 8:20, I got to take my shower. At 8:50, I got to have everything done. 9 o'clock, I got to be right in the car. At 9:15, I got this. We got it down. And all we have to do is just repeat it. And every once in a while, we'll take out a little spot and put something in it. And we keep going over and over and over in these patterns in our life. And God's trying to stop us. I see it all the time. I'm driving down the road, okay? It's 65 miles an hour. I'm doing 70, okay? I know that's called speeding. I understand that. And so do the police if they ever catch me. But I'm driving at 70, and I'm watching these people doing 80 and 90 miles an hour. And I'm thinking, where are they going? Well, they're in a hurry. And I can guarantee you that if I sit there tomorrow, I'll see the same car with the same driver driving the same speed, because every day they get up late and they got to be at a certain place at a certain time. And when an accident happens, they're the first one cussing everybody out, weaving in and out, trying to find a way to get around everybody. Whereas if they changed their pattern, they would have had the problem. And that's the same thing that happens in our lives. When we keep in this consistent pattern that we're controlling everything, and we keep messing up, how do we expect things to change if we're doing this? And so what God's trying to do is say, you need to understand there is a pattern that's different. Have you ever seen these little eye tests they give you? Or on a test, they've got these boxes and they've got these patterns in there. And one of the patterns is just different. And you've got to spot it. And you're sitting there and you're trying your best to figure out which one of them is different. And you work and you work and you work and you strain and you strain and you strain. And you can't figure it out. And then all of a sudden, your eye just goes to this one little spot. And you recognize, oh, that's the pattern. That's what God's trying to do to our lives. We're looking at this big, huge, fuzzy lens, and what he's trying to do is say, hold on a minute. I need you to turn it up a little bit and really focus here, because here in your life, I got a change for you today. And guess what happens? That change that may only be a few seconds will change your whole life for eternity. One of the ladies that was talking this week, she was born with no face. And so when she was born, she couldn't breathe, and they had to get her air and everything and stuff. She grew up going through all kinds of surgeries and everything else. But she never knew, all she knew about Jesus was he was this little baby that they wrap up on Christmas and put in a manger. And then he was gone. He disappeared till next year. Until all of a sudden somebody in junior high, I think it was, invited her to her youth group. And she went. And she said she loved the food. So she came back. And through that loving of that food, her coming back and hearing about Jesus changed her life. What happened? Somebody looked at her and didn't see a deformed, messed up young lady. She saw someone that needed Jesus. That changed the rest of her life. You see her, I mean, she's awesome. Her story and her love for God is just miraculous. But that decision changed her life. She got out of the pattern of listening to people tell her, you're ugly. You really didn't deserve to live. You're so grotesque. Until God changed. And now you would not even notice. So what's the last thing we got to do? Give me Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not rely on your own understanding. In all your ways, know him. And what will he do? He will make your path straight. You know what happens in our lives, ladies and gentlemen? Why we get so wore out and tired? Because we want to do it our way. We're still walking around in circles. The path is going every which direction. If God was to really take your life or my life and draw it on a map, Google couldn't even get you from point A to point B. You talk about going every which way, detours, coming back, starting over, going this path and figuring out that took me to the wrong path. Oh, got to come back and start all over again. You don't start over again. You started over when you met Jesus. That's the starting point. And listen, if there's going to be any detours, he knows where the detours need to be. Instead of doing our own thing. And so what we need to do is this. Being a parent, when we had our first, we had been married a little over 3 years, and we had our first son, Tim. And Tim had this problem of not being able to keep down his formula, because after he would eat the formula, the top of his stomach would not close, and so therefore all of that stuff would come back up. You're sitting there dressed up, got your clothes on, feeding him, and you go to burp him. And so you have all of this, and I don't know if you've ever smelled formula that's thrown up. It doesn't smell good anyway, but it stinks worse. And it was forever. This was the pattern for like about 9 months or more, until they told him he would grow out of it once he would sit up. Then the flap in the stomach would close. You talk about trying your patience. I've already told you the story on Christmas Eve when he was brought home. He was born on the 19th of December, and we finally got him on December the 24th, I think it was, or 23rd or 22nd. It was somewhere in there. But getting angry because he was keeping me awake, and me spanking a little boy, telling him to hush up and go to sleep. And it was hard, you know. You're thinking, okay, you're ready for this. You're not ready for this. But as growing up with 3 kids, I also found out you cannot treat all 3 kids the same. They all have their own spirit and their own will. And you've got to learn how to deal with that. And so what are you doing with that child? You're learning with that child to teach them that there's another will in here. And that's what God's trying to do with us, is to teach us there's another will, and it's not yours, it's mine. It's my will in your life, because I will make your way easier. I learned that once I calmed down, instead of getting angry, I was more peaceful. I was not as agitated, not as angry, and life was awesome. I didn't have to exert very much effort. Do you know that? You know how much effort you have to exert to get angry? You know how much effort you got to exert to have peace and quiet? Very little. Very little. And that's what God's trying to do with you this morning. He's trying to say, listen, I know you're a Christian, and I know you know about your future, but what about your present? There's enough to aggravate you right now. And are you letting it? or are you going to let me control it?